Welcome back, everybody. Man, I tell you what, it has been a while since we talked to you, and we greatly apologize for that. But here I am sitting here with my best bud, Chancey, again, on a very hot Texas Sunday.
Well, summer's here, isn't it, Brad? Good morning, everyone. I hope y'all are doing well. Like I said, we apologize again. I know it's been several weeks, but we made it. We got back together today, and so we're going to try to, kind of follow up where we left off last time.
So hopefully your memory's better than ours, because we ended up leaving off last time with a little bit of brush control, where we talked about getting rid of mesquite, getting rid of yaupon. Well, now what we're going to talk about today might be a little opposite of that.
Yes, it is. And so what are we going to talk about today? There's so many things. There's drought going on.
Well, I guess we should mention that for the people that aren't living here, Chancey.
Yeah.
It's hot here right now. Yeah, it's middle of June, towards the end of June now. Been at 100 degrees plus in central Texas for the past 2 weeks already, I guess. Little to no rainfall anywhere around. And everything's burning up in a pretty big hurry around here.
Yes, it's drying up quick, and it's statewide, too. I mean, it's burning up quick right here in central Texas, but even in northeast Texas, it's burning up really fast. And goodness, South Texas and, West Texas just look awful.
And, it appears it may even be a big part of the nation this time.
I think so. Yeah, well, just look at those poor guys in California, what they're facing right now,
Yeah, no fireworks this 4th of July.
No, I wouldn't think so. We're under a burn ban right now, aren't we? We got to be able to.
Yeah, of course, Chancey, he's pro-wildfire, so.
Yeah. Well, sometimes this country burned in the summer.
Yeah, but
that was before we had houses and everything, and we don't want nothing burning around our house.
In our little neck of the woods here, 4th of July fireworks are banned for the most part, I think. I know Bell County banned all fireworks, and so I'm sure the rest of the counties aren't far behind. It's probably a pretty good idea because it is super dry. The nighttime temperatures, we went fishing the other night. I've been taking the kids fishing, a few times a week in the evenings, because they like to fish, and it is unbearably hot.
Even after 8 o'clock.
Dude, I'm sitting out there wringing wet from sweat. They're sitting there putting 15,000 worms on hooks and weights on and untangling lines and taking fish off of hooks and all that, working like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And they're just having time of their life.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's part of that. It's funny you say that. I took my little girl to the coast a couple weeks ago, my wife and I, and took her fishing, and she goes to Rockdale, and she knows that I'm a Cameron Yeoman. So I took her fishing, and she was keeping track of who was winning, Yeoman or Tigers.
Oh, was she really?
Yeah, so it was like Cameron Yeoman 0, and Rockdale Tiger already had 6 or 7 fish.
There is no possible way you let her win, Chancey.
Well, you can't even have fish, because I was like, Rockdale Tiger doesn't realize that Cameron Yeoman is baiting the fish, untangling everything, getting the fich off, putting the shrimp on the hook.
Oh, my God, ain't that the truth? Doing all the work.
The Rockdale Tiger smoked me.
By the time we got through fishing the other night, you couldn't even see me due to being under a whole pile of moss.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, good Lord, and everything else that was taken off of hooks for the 1,000th time.
Oh, I know. I wish I had taken a picture. My little girl, she's like, I got this. I can cast that. I was like, okay, well, you got it. You're on your own. Well, anyway, I went back and checked on her a few minutes later, and that hole is just a bird nest at the end of that thing. Cork was wrapped around. I had to cut it out. I couldn't even get it fixed. So you can imagine.
Yep. And
fun stuff.
It is fun being a parent.
Yes, it is.
But like you said, there's no wind in the evenings. It is just straight up unbearable heat.
Yeah.
And me and Chancey are older than we used to be too. It didn't bother me. I guess it was this hot when I was in my 20s probably, but man, it really bothers you now. But
I remember that one year, I forget when it was. It might have been 96 was a bad drought. 96 was a bad drought. And I remember my uncle was putting up turkey barns over there in Buckholtz, and I forget how many days in a row over 100 was that summer. It was unreal. And then when it started raining in August, it really came. But man, we were bad dry in 96.
And we were. That was when I bought my first cows, actually. I was 16 years old that year.
Yeah, we were 16.
They were cheap. I think I give like $300 a pair for those first calf cows. They were dirt cheap back in 96, and nobody wanted them.
It was a bad drought.
And it could be coming again.
Yeah, it could be.
The market's still holding strong with all the death losses in the feed yards in Kansas and everywhere else due to the heat and all too, I guess. But so the market's holding strong, which is, unusual. But I think here at our local sale barn, Milam County Livestock Auction, I think they had 3,500 head last week or something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess it's beginning to shift. We have customers coming in the feed store, and of course feed's high. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, everything is so ridiculously expensive. You got $5.19 diesel here in town right now, and so, you know, we have several customers that are just like, man, when you eventually just got to say enough's enough and throw your hands in the air.
You don't get an ROI, and there's no return on investment at all. It ain't worth it, man.
I know, and no matter how much you love old Elsa out there in the pasture, sometimes enough's enough, and you just gotta call it quits. But you know, and that's sad to say, as high as food prices are already right now. It's something to be concerned about. But so what we talked about last time was brush clearing. We talked about getting rid of mesquites. We talked about getting rid of yaupon and all that stuff, which is important for creating an ideal habitat.
And it also helps water infiltration too. That brush, like cedar and stuff, it eats a lot of water. You know, it doesn't have that much of a root system,
and that's becoming more and more valuable.
Yeah,
and so I guess what we forgot to mention was that's all applicable. But you don't want to do it too close up to a stream.
No, and that's what I want to say. So if you got streams on your property and even gullies, you know, it
river,
doesn't have to
stream,
be
creek,
if it's a creek,
whatever.
Doesn't, you know, you got ephemeral streams, intermittent streams, perennial streams, doesn't matter, even a gully. If you're going to be clearing brush around it, you don't want to clear directly up to the top of the bank. You just don't do. It helps with erosion, helps with water infiltration, it helps from bank cutting and everything. So I wanted to mention that. We probably should have brushed on it last topic, but so if you are clearing brush, leave something. You know, even if it's yaupon, that's all you got to do with it. Yaupon's better than nothing, especially if it's a dry, like gully type area. Now, you can go in there and selectively kind of clear and mulch and then plant native grasses, but try to maintain what we call a stream buffer along any streams. And, you know, a minimum on small streams, 50 foot, you know, but the bigger the better. On those bigger streams, you know, we'll plant buffers 200 feet, you know, of hardwoods on both sides and native grasses. But it truly, truly, truly helps the ecology of the stream and the functioning of the stream. It prevents erosion. It prevents sloughing. It helps. So you got to think about
basically it's supposed to slow down the water flow.
Yes, it slows down. So when you clear vegetation along stream channels, think about it's a drop of water coming down from the sky.
Accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared, actually, with gravity.
There you go, physics, yeah. And so think about it's going to hit bare dirt, you know, or bare soil, and it's fast. And if it's a heavy rainfall, it's coming fast, and it's a whole lot of it. And there's no slowing it down. It's hitting bare ground. A lot of times bare ground is cooked because of the sun, so it kind of creates hard pan, which makes, you know, perfect.
That's even worse.
Make it for water to run. Usually that water starts running, it starts channelizing, it starts cutting, it starts moving. So we need to kind of like, so what's the function of a stream? If you think about it, what is the primary job of a stream?
Yeah, and Chancey proved me wrong with this one because I was totally wrong with my definition of what a stream was.
Well, you know, depending on the scientists, the stream ecologists, they say streams were made, like, well, the reason God made them was to deposit sediment, to move sediment from one location to another one.
Fill in low spots.
And when they get out in the floodplain, they deposit their load, which is usually high nutrients, it's sediment.
It gathered somewhere in a flood.
Yeah, are gathered upstream, and then it gets out in a floodplain and it deposited it, and that's why our floodplains
are such good dirt for farming and grass and everything
for
else.
Eons, that stream's been depositing its sediment. And, you know, they've done the science on those stream ecologists. There's a math and there's ratio in it, and it holds true. And I don't know the details. I'm not a stream ecologist, but I've read up about it a little bit, and there's ratios and mathematical formulas and basic physics that's designed in streams, and it applies to river streams with waterfalls and rocks, to the Mississippi River, to the Little River, to Cannon Snap. You know, they follow those same basic physical principles, and it's mathematics, and they function like that. And so they've been able to rank streams based on their functionality, how they were supposed to function. And you know that some of them they're like, this is a degraded stream. You know, it's channelizing, it's eroding, it's eating its bank.
Like naturally, the stream was supposed to work this way.
Yeah, it's not functioning properly.
But due to things that have happened over time, and is now starting to operate in a way that it was not intended to operate.
Yeah, it's just not operating, which, like the science said, based on, you know, the measurements that they've taken. And like they said, there's a whole bunch of stream measurements they take, and then they divide them like entrenchment ratio and the top of bank and the floodplain width and shelving. And like I said, there's different types of streams, but they all function, you know, pretty much the same. So removing vegetation along streams just adds to all kinds of problems as far as erosion and bank cutting. And also, in sandy land substrate, you remove a lot of vegetation along streams, or even in entire watersheds, especially a watershed level, you remove a whole lot. Sometimes those little small streams can't now carry the payload. They can't carry. They weren't designed to carry that amount of sediment.
That amount of sediment that's coming into the stream.
Yeah, which leads to more problems. So all streams that are functioning naturally, they have what's called riffles, pools, and runs. They got a little pool of water, then they got a riffle, like where's your gravel bars kind of there, and then it runs, and then it'll go to a little pool again, and that's kind of the way the stream design. That's just Mother Nature, the ecosystem working, and that's what water does to a landscape. When it's functioning properly and it's getting out of its banks, it just creates that kind of landscape. Well, erosion is really bad. It's carrying too much water. It starts cutting down and then it gets entrenched like a ditch.
Right.
And it can't get out of its floodplain when it needs to, which makes it, when it's carrying a lot of water again, if it's not, it's cutting even more. It's still cutting.
And you got to think about the distance that all this water comes from. I mean, the water comes from everywhere, basically, towards these streams, which I guess at the end of its journey to the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, basically they call it the watershed, So, and you have watersheds and you got sub-watersheds, So we're in the Brazos watershed's the big one.
Right.
But then you can get a sub-watershed of the Little River.
But so like you said, 100-foot buffer, 50-foot buffer zone that you leave intact is good. But if you think about how far all that water comes from, like any little change anywhere is going to affect the amount of water that eventually gets to the rivers and to the lakes and
downstream.
And so I mean, you got things like impervious cover, like in the big cities,
Huge
where all the people are coming to, like all the concrete,
which adds more runoff.
Concrete does not let much water, doesn't slow the water down very much.
There's not percolating in. I mean, you've been in the city before, and a big heavy rain comes, man, you can't even drive down the road. Water's running everywhere.
That's right. You've already, imagine if that was dirt, how bad that would already be washing at that point. And so eventually it does get to dirt.
Yeah.
And just imagine all that water combined together.
Yes, and there's no percolation, so that's why a lot of our aquifers are drying up. That's why a lot of our springs aren't flowing in the hill country. Because they're not being recharged because it's all running out. So we've tried to fix these kind of things, and these issues, and thinking it was good in the past. And, a lot of times with the best of interest and the best mindset, and we think we're doing good, I mean, we've all done it. You pat yourself on the back, you think you're doing good, but then 60, 70 years down the road, like, oh, man.
Well, and so things that are much, much, much better at allowing groundwater to slow down, rainwater to slow down and even to filter through the soil down to the groundwater, are things like your trees.
Yeah.
And, we've been baling hay recently, and like you said, it's super dry. And so I've baled coastal fields, I've baled native grass fields, and then I must say that the native grass fields have just been amazing to me this year.
Yeah, as dry, hot and dry as it is.
You know how the black dirt where we are, the shrink swell soil, how it cracks? The coastal fields are cracked. There's literally no grass there to bale, even really worth messing with. The grasshoppers love the coastal grass. They're mowing it down. Then you get to a native grass hayfield, like not one crack in it that you could even find, really. No, I guess,
don't crack. And if you take your knife and you dig down in that soil, it'll be moist in there.
And so explain to us why that is.
Well, the biology of the species. Okay, native grass are very similar to an oak tree, So think of it like the tortoise and the hare. So native grasses, they spent the first few years of their life trying to develop a root system, just like an acorn.
Which is why it's important not to graze them at first if you're going to try to establish native grasses.
Yes. And so you can look at A&M and Google it. They've done tons and tons of looking at the root depth and how fibrous native grass, like little blue stem. It's like, say, a non-grazed little blue stem is 6-7 feet tall. Well, it's got just as much biomass in the ground. It's super duper fibrous. And
real fine little roots.
Very
just
fine,
tons of them.
And the vegetation, and it helps water percolate down into that soil.
Well, first off, it's slowing the water up.
Yes.
Like it's not just running right past it to the creek. The biomass itself is going to hold the water back and give it time to go down.
Yeah, think of the water drop falling from the sky. It's hitting the top of a native grass first and then
splattering
running down
it, probably. So you're going to have such a big drop hitting the ground to begin with.
Just like standing in the woods in a rainstorm, if you've ever been in a bottom, you'll see how even a heavy rain, that stuff's just dripping in there.
Yes.
It's like you're in a rainforest just dripping. It's not pounding you to death.
Yes, and good native grasses, and I guess I should have taken a picture of what it looked like, but compared to coastal grass, it's so much more dense.
And the root system's deeper.
The root system is so much
3 foot down in the ground.
Yeah, super deep. And those root systems slow the water down and also allow the water to run down through those root systems.
And filter it, and it holds
filters
the moisture.
It too.
And then it gets in our aquifers, and it recharges our aquifers, and it allows spring to flow again, and even streams flow that used to not flow. Especially in the hill country.
You'd really be surprised too at the amount of soil that you lose from such a small area. Like for instance, Matt sent me and you a video of a demonstration where they had like a tilled a tilled little box of soil. They had a early on established, I think.
That was a neat video.
That was a neat video. Then they had a no-till ag practice little sample, and then they had a native grass sample, I think. I don't remember what all they were, but what it did was they had two ways of collecting water. One was on the edge where that caught the runoff, what the surface runoff was. And there was another one that caught the water that ran down through the soil profile. And so I have to put that on our Facebook page.
Yeah,
I guess.
That's pretty cool.
It was super cool because it was simulating a rainfall event up top, which was a relatively heavy rainfall event, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But like the plowed up soils, in my mind, I would have thought the water would have just like ran right through it. Like, I mean, okay, you got the soft soil, it's just going to run straight through it. Okay, but literally probably half the box of soil along with all the water was in the runoff spot there. Very little through the soil profile, and then you worked your way down to the no-till wheat field simulation part of it. All the water had literally ran down through the soil profile.
Yeah, and hardly any sediment.
Hardly any sediment in it, and literally no runoff. Like it was exact opposite of the tilled soil on the beginning up there, where they expected the most erosion and the least water infiltration. And it's quite fascinating. I'll put that on there.
Yeah, no, it was a great video, and it just what we're talking about, it shows it very, very clear. So you think of that same process on a large scale, on a watershed scale, or a river basin level.
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
Think about it on acres upon acres of where all this water is coming from. If you change that up, anywhere's in the system, if you change that, obviously we can't go plant native grasses in the middle of downtown Austin.
No.
But like as far as like you're talking about, as far away from a stream as you can, or in places where you're able to.
Yeah,
it's a good
try
practice.
Not to till around, your streams. Don't plant, if you can. A lot of it, it's just we have to eat, and we have to, but a lot of our land was cleared, 150 years ago, and there was no stream ecologists really, they were trying to make a living, and so a lot of the land was cleared right up to the bank of the river.
Well, nobody probably really at that time knew the effects that it would have on it either. You don't really think about it.
No, they were trying to survive.
That's right.
They were trying to survive. So, but now we do know. So if you've got streams, and even if you've got degraded streams, you can plant buffers. You can plant buffers around these streams and buffers around your gullies. And not only does it help you with your stream dynamics, it also creates wildlife habitat and also creates corridors. That little bit of brush, especially if you've got improved pasture, allowing your streams and allowing your gullies to have some form of a buffer strip, it helps with erosion, creates habitat. It's a good thing from a wildlife standpoint and a stream health level especially, which our streams are vital to us, and I mean we need to take
in
care
many
of
ways and becoming more and more vital.
Yes, but I guess that's where we wanted to follow up with the brush, but that leads us into this whole stream, conversation.
And this is a neat conversation. It really is, because if you Chancey, I guess the best place to start with this would be for you to explain to us exactly like the formula for figuring how exactly deep that a stream is supposed to be. Because this is astonishing. Now, we have a river right here outside of town called the Little River in central Texas. We have a bridge that leads out of town going over the top of it. And if you look at it every year, there's more and more of the bank being sloughed off.
More sand in it.
More sand becoming. It's getting wider and wider and wider and wider.
Gravel bars are starting to turn into sand bars.
They are.
A lot of them.
Yes, and so it's becoming entrenched is the word I guess that you should use for it. It's just cutting deeper and deeper and deeper, and so it makes it harder for the river to get out of its banks.
Yes.
Which is a very bad thing.
Yes. Well, I mean, we don't like floodplains, but, we know now, don't build your houses in floodplains, but, we don't like them during the summertime either if we're farming. But historically and ecologically, in the function of it, streams were supposed to flood. They were supposed to. That's how they deposit. When they got too much level, there's a whole science to this, y'all, and I don't know the science real well. I just have taken some classes on it a little bit, but I don't know. I don't know the exact physics and the mathematics of it, but the basis of it is every stream, whether it be the mountain stream or whether it be the Mississippi River, they have what's called an ordinary high water mark, or what they consider a bank full. And this is where the stream...
And where this mark is would really surprise you.
Yes.
Like, it's not halfway up the bank of the Little River over here where you would think that, okay, that would be a high water mark. It's relatively, if a stream is healthy...
Yeah, so that stream's healthy. It's moving its channel. It's moving back and forth. It gets rain events, and it comes up 2 or 3 inches or a foot, and then it goes back down. But this measurement, this bank full measurement, ordinary high water mark, they say, depending on the stream, that it would have one of those events 2 to 3 times a year. And it said, and always within 1.5 years.
Well, because
even in the West,
if a stream is not entrenched, it's going to come out pretty easy.
Yes, it's going to come out.
And that's what it's supposed to do.
Yes, because it deposits. It's going to be moving sediment, and it deposits in that floodplain. So that's why those floodplains are so things. So that measurement, that bank full width, if you look at it, you can kind of see it's usually where, and it changes for every stream, but the principle's true. Like, say, you look at our streams in Central Texas, and there's different kinds of streams, y'all, but they all have a bank full, and they all have these measurements.
And this might be a difficult image to put together in your head, but you could Google this bank full.
Yeah.
And you'll see what he's talking about where this mark is.
Well, if you're a river rat and you grew up and you like to fish on rivers and everything, we all know, okay, so think of like you got a cut bank and a deposit bank. That's how rivers function. When they make a turn, they're cutting on one side and they're depositing gravel and they're depositing on the other one.
Because every river's trying to get straight.
Yeah, eventually they're meandering, but they cut and they eventually make oxbows. But the bank full is a good one, is the top of the point bar. And if you think of the top of the point bar, think of a gravel bar that comes out there right where the vegetation stops, and it's a slope, and then it slopes down to the river. That's usually, nearly always, if it's a point bar, so it's the ends, like the peninsula that runs out into the curve. Mm-hmm. That top of that point bar, basically where the vegetation is, usually sand there or some type of deposit, and then it turns to gravel bar, and then it goes. That's usually your ordinary high water mark, which is generally can vary. That water mark depends on how high that is from the surface of the water, from what it normally is. You can also tell them a lot of times vegetation will tell you a lot, but also the undercutting. If you see a stream that's starting to have undercut banks, just up from that undercut is usually the ordinary high water mark. And depending how channelized or how functioning or how degraded the stream is, you can even see undercuts from years back, because if that stream is degrading, it keeps cutting down, you'll see that stuff, because that load on that stream really hasn't changed much. It's still draining the same amount of acreage. You got a watershed, and it's draining that watershed, even small, sub-watersheds,
You may be pushing more water to it due to impervious cover.
Yes, you might be pushing it.
Or deforestation or whatever, but...
Pushing more water to it and more sediment because of clearing, whatever.
Mm-hmm. You haven't increased the area that it drains, but you may have increased. So that's where we're talking. It's important to slow down as much of that water as you can.
Yes. And so historically with that bank full, whatever that level is, and then you measure across the river from the top of the point bar to the point, what you would consider the ordinary high water mark. You measure the depth there, and you multiply it by 2. And 2 times that. So
it's basically like pulling a string from the high water mark on one side and put a level on it and make sure you got a straight line across the river from where that grass starts.
Yep. Or where that mark is.
Where that mark
whatever
is.
you determine it to be.
And then you measure down to the top of the water, and that's your high water mark.
Well, you measure down, that's your, and that's, that your high water mark is your marks on the end.
I'm sorry, that would be the depth.
Yeah, that's your depth. But then you take that measurement down and you multiply it by 2, and that's what they say is your flood prone.
And basically you should be at the top of the bank.
Or close to it.
By that high water mark times 2.
Yeah, you should be by the top of the bank.
Or
because
by that depth times 2.
That stream, in order to be functioning perfect, when it gets to carrying a load of water that much, it needs to be getting into its floodplain. If it's not getting into its floodplain, that means that it's entrenched and it can't get out at that level.
And so what happens then? Your trench gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Your streams get wider
and wider,
deeper, and shallow. Yes. They start filling in with sand. And I just have to say this: my father-in-law's a river rat, just for example. And he's grown up on the river his entire life. He's fished and he knows that river like the back of his hand. But he told me when he was a little boy, so this would have been in the 50s, that he watched a squirrel go across from one side of the river to the other side of the river on Little River.
He doesn't have a life jacket. Do it now.
No, or an airplane. So the trees, and so think about that too. The trees, there was canopy, there was shade. So then you got a functioning ecosystem. Detritus falling into the water, and the shade don't have the evaporation rate.
Shoot, probably half of those trees that squirrel climbed on are now inside
gone.
The river, washed away.
Yeah. But that was in the 50s. So there you go, 70 years. Look at that river now. It's hard to imagine.
Let's look at what's happened in 70 years. We got like you said, more impervious cover, pushing more water. We tilled up probably closer to the river banks and that type of thing. But then we got the dams too.
Yeah, and the dams, they come. So what's happening to so many of our dams right now? They're being filled in because that load that's coming, it can't get out, so it's being deposited right at the dam. So they're filling in.
Well,
a lot of our old dams.
At some point,
getting shallower and shallower.
Yes, at some point, somebody was walking up the river and saw a beaver dam, and they were like, "Hold up a second!
Yeah.
If we take a bunch of dirt and actually dam this up and call it a lake, well, then we'll have water for all the people to drink.
Sure.
We'll slow water down from going up the river to drain land so that we can farm closer to the rivers and all this type of thing, which probably was a great idea at the time.
Oh yeah, it was. But we built giant dams. A beaver's dam function ecologically. They function good because they're almost always at the ordinary high water mark. Once that river gets out there, it goes. And
they got a hard time finding a stick long enough to reach all the way across the bank.
Yeah. So generally, as those streams get channelized and stuff, beavers don't build dams in it anymore because the stream's not functioning. They burrow into the holes, And some rivers and streams are too big anyway. But small streams can handle beavers' dams, and beavers can work with them so long as they're not entrenched. And if they're working and getting in their floodplain, and most streams that are able to get in their floodplain have good vegetation around them. They just are, because if they're not have good vegetation, they start cutting.
And so a lot of what has changed was, used to, you got a big rainfall event, the water come rushing down the river, down the stream, down the creek, whatever. It reached its banks and it went out, and that slowed the water down.
But historically, Little River would get out at least twice a year, probably once in the spring, once in the fall. So historically, that was the that we changed. That was the hydrology of the river. Just got out and it deposits banks. Now, it doesn't get out unless we get a terrible, terrible, terrible flood, and the dams, they're letting water out of the dams, and it's raining like crazy. And then you've got these cataclysmic flooding events that take place. So, and another problem with the dams is that's really adding to this entrenchment of the rivers, because instead of, they're constantly, letting water out of the river or out of the lake into the river, or slowing it down, vice versa. They keep on doing that. The river will go up one day, and you can talk to anybody who fishes on the river. They'll be like, "Oh man, we got to catch it while it's going up." Oh, they close the dam, man. The fish is terrible. Yeah, well, when they get big bad rain events upstream, and it doesn't rain down here, they open those dams, and then it channelizes down here, when historically that stuff should have been in people's floodplains for 50 miles. It should have been spread out across floodplains.
That would have slowed it all down.
Ripping down the river, cutting things, eroding the bank. And then when you get into, add these, when you clear vegetation along the banks, and then our vertical soils, and they've been dry, because now, I know one year recently that river got out 3 times. This wasn't too long ago, which that was just unheard of for us, but that we were getting bad, terrible floods. A lot of us doing this impervious covers, or flooding is getting much, much worse, removing vegetation. But most of the time, we never get it flood. I can remember 1991, I think, was one time I remember the river, Little River Bridge being solid water under there.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't see that every year. But historically, it would get out there.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it was a good thing. It deposited soil in there.
Slow the water flow down, and instead of all the water rushing down the stream at one time, it slows it down. Yeah. You got your trees and stuff all holding it back, a little bit too. So,
I want to talk about just the function of rivers. So most time rivers, before they start getting really degraded, it's not one thing. Mother Nature and the ecosystem system is very resilient. And there's a lot of cogs fitting together like a giant spider web. But usually when something starts going bad, it's not one thing. It is a 1-2 punch and then a kick in the teeth and then maybe a stomp on the back while you're down, So, for example, a couple years ago, I went down into Lake Pontchartrain, and we were looking at in the Lake Pontchartrain. Just the history of it alone is amazing. But we went down to Lake Pontchartrain, which used to be like one of the largest freshwater swamps in the world. This is the swamp that built New Orleans. Giant cypress trees, 10-foot diameter, and those cypress tree stumps are still there. You can look on Google Earth, and you can see the steel dredge lines where they cut dredges through the swamp and even to float these trees out, and then they skidded these giant trees out of the swamp. You can still see them, and this was done in the late 1800s. You can still see those skid marks on Google Earth. It's amazing. So you can get in there and look, and you can see where they were hauling all these trees out of the swamp and putting them in there. So they cut down that swamp, and they were saying, well, that's fine. The swamp will regenerate. Cypress trees regenerate. But that forest never regenerated. It doesn't. You go down there, there's
still
no
to this
cypress
day.
Trees. Yeah. Well, the farther north you go, it started to regenerate. But so what I'm saying here is, there's a lot of issues going on. So there's a lot of things going on. Lake Pontchartrain used to be one of the largest freshwater swamps in the world. And so it was fertilized and kept its nutrients to the nutrient flooding from the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. The Mississippi River, before it hit New Orleans on flood events, it would get out of its bank. And if you look at the map of Google Earth, it would get out and flood into Lake Pontchartrain, and those flood waters would deposit sediment, and that's how that swamp maintained its fertility. The swamps
was from the Mississippi River.
From the Mississippi River flooded into it, and so right now, that whole area, we've been trying to, everybody in the world's been planting cypress trees, planting them in there, think they do good. They go north, but down in that area, they don't. They call it degraded swamp, and they're not, it's turning, transitioning. But so what we did is we can't, even though we built New Orleans, and that wasn't a very good place to build a city, New Orleans, it's below sea level, I think. But anyway, we had so the Mississippi River's got dams, or levees all over it now, because it can't have flooding events. So guess what? When the Mississippi River floods really bad, it doesn't get out of its bank unless it's really, really bad. Remember in Katrina, the levees failed?
Sure.
The river got out, all the flooding and all that rain.
And so that's what's basically led to
that's keeping the Mississippi from getting in there and flooding into the Pontchartrain. So now you add to that, we built channels all into that swamp so we could float these trees out. Well,
that turned into a drainage ditch too, huh?
That turned into a drainage ditch too, but also you think eventually Lake Pontchartrain is connected to the coast, the ocean. But then we also, later on, they built a canal that connected like the Gulf to the bay, and now salt water can get in there and use these other things, and it's naturally the land there is naturally sinking too, because they say, and the ecologists up there talk about that when the Mississippi would flood, it raised the soil,
because it dropped so much sediment in there.
Yeah. So I think they call it subsidence. It's sinking. It's sinking because it's not being restored. And so then now you've got an intrusion of salt water that's coming in there too, because we built all this stuff. So the salinity, even though it's a lot of fresh water because there's stuff still coming down, but in hurricanes and stuff like that, there's salt water able to penetrate in there probably more than it used to.
Man, you're talking about a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, okay, and then hold on, it gets better. And so then, so vegetation is a problem, So then we've also got, the vegetation you want there and everything you want to try to plant trees. Well, we've got a terrible invasive species down there too called the nutria. That likes to eat just about everything that you plant and everything. And it's also, creating, eating vegetation as well.
How did it get introduced down there?
We brought them in here from South America as thinking it was going to, for the fur market. From what I read,
that was what they were brought in for.
Yeah, because, we were trapping beavers like crazy, people, and I think they brought them in here, because we had trapped a lot of the beavers out back in the market hunting days, and all that stuff. Like, there for a while, there wasn't a whole lot of beavers here in Central Texas. Now they're everywhere. But I think a lot of them, we're trapped out. So I heard somewhere that they brought them in here for that very market. And I guess they're prolific. And, just look at the problem now that not beavers, but nutrients have and that's a system. So, yeah, and I think there's several other issues, but those are the kind of issues there. So that swamp's not regenerating, So,
I mean, and speaking of that too, isn't there a similar case up in Indiana? Isn't it?
Yeah, they called that the Grand Kankakee Marsh, I think it was the Grand Kankakee, and basically it was 1 million acres.
To hear him talk about it, that was something to see.
Yeah, well, they called it the Everglades of the North. I think you can. There's a documentary, y'all, on it. It was like the biggest wetland up in the Midwest.
I mean, if you look at the old map of it, it took up a good part of Indiana.
Well, they said it was the whole northern port of it. And I think it even bordered Illinois, maybe just south of Lake Michigan. But it was 1 million acres, and it was a 250-mile long wetland or river system that fed all kinds of wetlands and marshes and swamps and wet prairies and everything. And they channelized it, and they made that stream into a 90-mile stretch.
250 miles cut into 90 miles
straight ditch.
Straight ditch, yeah.
Yeah, which screwed up the entire ecology. And it basically now, I think that marsh area, there's probably a state park there or something, but it's only 2,000 acres of what was 1 million.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, and so I've heard somewhere, Brad, that they estimate when they did that it took out of a fifth of the waterfowl and migratory birds.
Well, I mean, if you consider taking a 250-mile wetland and bunching it down to a 90-mile
and then take out
90-mile ditch.
Yeah, and then we cleared it all too.
And then that too.
Yeah, so we took.
And it was being overhunted and being over.
Yeah,
it was being. What years was that?
Well, the market hunting was going on in the late 1800s.
There was no regulations at all.
And that was being overhunted. But then we started realizing, well, hey, we can farm here too and drain this thing, because that's why so it's just crazy. Y'all know the Corps of Engineers and the federal government, years ago, we thought it was a good thing. We need, right after World War II, we got the Marshall Plan and we wanted to take care of Europe and send them a lot of money and send them food. And so we started paying our farmers to to tile their fields with drain tile.
Hey, farm what you can.
Drain wetlands. If it's too wet, then we need a channelite. These floodplains, that doggone it, you can't farm if the water's getting out 2 or 3 times a year. So let's channelize it, cut it, entrench build dams, channelize it, get it out of that field so we can farm it. And now, we realize looking back, wow, we really screwed up the system, and now our streams aren't functioning. The water's not percolating down. They're filling in with sediment, and when it's filling in with sediment, you get these flash floods. It's just a giant mess. And not only that, you got turbidity levels, soil messes with your mussels because all the gravel bars and the substrates are now being filled with sand and sediment, and it just causes all kinds of problems. And so now here it is, now the Corps of Engineers and the federal government are starting to pay people to plant buffers on the streams, and try to start protecting stuff. So it's kind of, hindsight's always 20/20, they say. And, we were trying to do good things.
And it is science. Science is constantly evolving,
Sure.
I mean, you do what you think is right at the time, what you have to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, that whole situation, and that can be said for a lot of things, just look at from our localized area here. I just have to say, just in our lifetime, Brad, me and Jeff Houston, when I would in junior high, we would go, he lived over there down Gravel Road out there out by Marlow, and me and him in the early 90s, I remember walking down. We would go camp and hog hunt down there, and just, running around, 12-year-old kids, what 12-year-old kids do. But we used to swim in Cannon Snap Creek. And I remember even catching channel cat in that creek, And now that creek is filled in, it just doesn't flow. And it might have stopped flowing and have puddles, but I never, ever remember it being all that sand. I remember swimming in it, being pools and riffles and runs, It's had enough that it had fish in it.
Sure.
And now a lot of it, you look at it, you drive across it now, and it's just not even running most of the time. So that's just in our lifetime.
I mean,
you think about...
Look how big the places were back then, though, Chancey, too. You could have... how big was, the Smith Woods back how many acres was that of just solid brush that slowed water down? And allowed things to soak in.
Yeah, and there were
stuff.
Sloughs all in there. There was all kinds of sloughs and, wetlands and all kinds of stuff in there. But, slowed everything down. So large scale clearing, especially taking out vegetation along streams can be bad.
Yes.
Well, not can be. It is bad.
Yes, and so you need to leave a buffer there.
Yes.
That's a long way to say that. And the bigger the buffer, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever's feasible. You got to do stuff that's ecologically sound, financially, financially, worth something,
and get rid of things like cedar trees and things like that use more water than they allow through the ground. I mean, and plant more things like native grasses.
Yes, if you can work that.
It's unbelievable. Like, what is the gentleman's name? And I might need to post that video, too, of the guy in Johnson City.
Oh, Bamberger. Mr. Bamberger. Yeah, y'all need to check that out. Mr. Bamberger started with a cedar break that was solid rock. I don't know.
Long story short, he used to own Church's Chicken, part of it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. And then they sold that, and he bought this property out here.
Yeah, and it was a solid cedar break, and no springs flowed, no streams flowed. It was just an overgraze, like we had talked about, cedar break, overgraze, lots of brush, no grass.
In the limestone.
Out in the hill country.
This is the hill country of Texas where it's a lot of limestone that is good for storing water, storing groundwater.
Yeah, and there's some, I think some YouTube clips, because I know he won, like, Lone Star Land Stewardship, and I know he works a lot with Parks and Wildlife for educational things. So there's some stuff out there, and he kind of goes into detail and even shows like how much root system one of those native grasses has compared to an improved pasture grass, and why it's functioning, and why now he's got streams flowing and he's got springs flowing.
Well, like you said, when he started with it, there was nothing. There was no streams. And, I mean, just something as simple as he did is things like taking out cedars and planting native grasses. And all of a sudden, the streams start to flow again.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, how unbelievable is that?
Yeah, it's quite the system.
Just something that simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the way that it functioned. And so, and I know as our population continues to grow, we're going to need to start thinking about this and thinking about it on a big scale.
Well, he even talked about how what he's doing there in Johnson City is pushing more water towards Austin.
Yeah, because it's going.
It's not running off down,
where it was designed to go. It was percolating through the soil, going into the aquifer, and which recharged streams. And so when the aquifer got full, guess what? There's where your springs pop up. And so now he's got vegetation, grass cover, wildlife doing good, and even recharging the aquifer. So, think about that on a large scale, on a watershed type scale, river basin.
Because all that water that is now in his little seeps and streams on his place used to have already been over here past Milam County.
Yeah.
Up the river.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would have already been, or I guess the opposite way, but
yeah.
But it would all be runoff, and you would catch none of it, which would lead to no aquifer recharge, and so that's why those native grasses and things like that for slowing down water and allowing it to soak into the ground and through the soil profile.
Yes,
is very important.
Yeah, and so because water's going to be a big deal, and we need to be.
Well, look at this year.
Yeah,
it's rained very little.
Yep.
And I mean, just something as simple as a little native grass hayfield compared to like an improved Bermuda grass hayfield in the black dirt. I can't say that it would be the same in the sand.
No, I think
that coastal Bermuda loves the sand, so I don't know if it's the same over there. You would know that.
I think it is. Like the native grass looks good still compared to and a lot of the Bermuda fields have been fertilized and haven't been cut yet. They still look good and green. A lot of them don't. The ones that have really been taken care of, they look good. But for example, I was digging in the dirt yesterday with my front end loader, and I dug a little bit into the native grass stuff because I needed some dirt. But believe it or not, it's hot and it's dry as in. I dug down 8 inches of sand, and it was just roots and all kinds of just mess. I didn't want to. I couldn't really do. I needed some workable dirt, so that I knew there was clay underneath there.
Tell them what you needed workable dirt for, Chancey.
A swimming pool. Yeah, I needed a level of ground for a swimming pool.
I got to do the same thing for my kids about a month ago.
But you were doing it in the wind. I lucked out. My father-in-law came and helped me and my wife.
They will catch some wind, buddy.
Oh yeah, goodness.
Yeah. And so if you need anybody to put your pool up, don't call me or Chancey because you're one and done on that deal. Ain't nobody wants to do 2 of those things.
Yeah, no sir. But anyway, I was digging down there, and where that clay was, it was wet enough to make a ball. I couldn't, Whereas
where the native grass,
where it's 40 yards away in my yard, which is a Bermuda yard, my tractor wouldn't even dig it. I mean, my father-in-law brought a skid steer over there with tracks, and it was able to manage. But he even had trouble. That ground was like a brick. Well,
Bermuda grass roots itself don't go very deep. I mean, they're more of a grow above ground, grow roots later type of a plant.
Yeah, they don't.
Whereas, like you said, the native grasses are more like a tree where they're shooting roots down like a mesquite tree almost.
Yeah, like different kinds of trees, different strategies. So, and think about the trees like the size of the acorn or the size of the fruit. So, generally, the larger fruit, the slower growing tree it is at first. With the smaller fruit, like a hackberry, generally shallow rooted.
That's right.
Little tall, small tree, its strategy is to get up, try to get sunlight and go. Whereas the oak tree and the native grass, So more energy. So think that acorn or even up pecans got a lot of food energy source in there that cotyledon can use. It comes up, it puts 2 little bitty leaves on, and then the rest of the time it's growing a root.
Shooting roots
and
down.
I've grown lots and lots of oak trees from acorns. And, and in 1 year you only see about this much, but I can pull it up, the root up out of the ground or go to plant it. And, it's that root's 12, 13 inches deep down there and as big around as your finger.
Nature has a way
on
it.
a little small tree. Yeah, you would
Nature
never
has
think.
a plan.
Same thing with the native grasses, so that's how it helps them percolate. And Bermuda grass just doesn't have the root system, I guess. Well, you don't. When you dig into there, they just don't have that.
But it's so odd that the more roots that it has, the better it is for groundwater. I mean, it's so backwards in your head.
Yeah,
You're like,
moisture in
these
the
things
soil.
got such roots. I mean, they're bound to be using a ton of water up.
Yeah,
but it actually allows water to.
With for native grasses. Now, that's not to say for cedar trees. Cedar trees are water eaters, and those roots are more fibrous.
Well, they never go dormant.
Yeah, they're more sick. But that was one of the problems with Bamber. He had to get rid of all that cedar. And cedar is generally a symptom of a problem, usually from overgrazing. And once you graze off all the native grasses, guess what grows?
Cedar trees.
Yeah, cedar trees, especially out there in the West, because a native grass community is pretty resilient. It's a very stable, resilient, so long as it's maintained burning or grazing, and you maintain it. Now, it gets not very stable if you take those things out of the system, burning, grazing.
Well, there's one field that we were baling. I was thinking about you the whole time I was baling it because it used to be a plowed up field probably 15, 20 years ago, I guess. It was farmed, and then all of a sudden it just got let go, just stopped farming it.
Yes, sir.
And it is just solid blue stem and every kind of native grass that you could think of that has now got established on that place. And is what the oddest thing was, and I put a picture of this on the Facebook page, was you could tell where the bluebonnets had been growing at.
Uh-huh.
The grass was was at least 2 or 3 inches taller and just this dark green color. Whereas you got off to the edge, you can still see the dead bluebonnets. The old growth is still there.
Mm-hmm.
And you get off to the edge of that, and I mean the grass is quite a bit shorter and much yellower.
Yeah, well, you can just do what I call the knife test. I mean, you can go out there with your pocket knife and go into a native pasture, well-maintained native pasture, and dig down with your knife. Like when it's dry right now, you'll have moisture in that native field. You go to a Bermuda grass field, and you just don't have the moisture in it. It's amazing.
And that's just a mild description of what's going down even deeper with your groundwater and that type of thing.
Yes. So
it's something to think about, even like with agriculture, with farming and stuff.
No-till, yeah.
Like we went to conventional farming with a lot of plowing and stuff, and we do it too.
Sure.
But everybody used to bed up rows. Used to farm in rows where they created beds, and I'm sure that did a lot better way of diverting water to a waterway or to where it didn't to where we're now doing mostly flat farming. And water just rushes,
Now, why did we change that, Brad? I remember that when we was kids, everybody put stuff in rows.
It's just fast and easy.
Fast and easy?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Herbicides came along.
Oh, and we could, Roundup Ready.
Yeah, lots of different things changed. And so we've gone to flatland farming.
Yeah.
Where if that water finds a crack, it's going to run down it. I mean, it's going to go to the lowest spot. It gets channelized, yeah. And you get washes like it's going out of style. And so now no-till farming is becoming a thing. And strip till farming is becoming a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation I had with you about the native grass roots and how that slows down water from running off. I mean, it's got me thinking we might shift gears next year to at least strip till farming.
Sure.
You leave that residue on top of the ground, that slows down water a lot.
And it helps with it's like a mulch. It helps with the heat, and your soil moisture.
Ground. Sure, it does.
Moisture, I mean, you think about mulch around a tree, how much difference it makes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And it's probably the next best thing.
Keeping it cooler.
Yeah.
And because that bare ground, and right now it's 103 degrees outside. Well, that's probably 120 or 130 on the ground if you were to put a thermometer
I bet it would be.
Yeah. You need to go put a thermometer there and just see.
Mm-hmm.
It probably is that hot, because that vegetation creates little not even vegetation, that thatch from the no-till, the leftover wheat or whatever.
The corn stalk, wheat straw.
Creates a micro habit, a climate there that's not as hot, holds more moisture, and also helps with percolation.
Yes, and breaks up the raindrops as they hit the ground. Like, I mean, you'd be amazed the splatter you get whenever a raindrop hits a freshly plowed field.
And it can still be friable under there. So you could drill into it. It's still friable. Those people that do that no-till, that.
We do no-till drill wheat and stuff. We've switched over to that on the wheat, on the broadcast planting side of it.
Yes, sir.
Well, because you just really don't have time to get corn out, and then plow everything and lose all your moisture and then drill wheat in there, So we did invest in a no-till drill several years ago, and that's the best thing since sliced bread, man. You catch you catch it right after a rainfall event where it softens it up just a little bit. You go out and you do a lot of no-till drilling of native grasses and stuff.
Oh yeah, I plant 100% of my native grass. I've even no-till Bermuda. Yeah, it works real good.
It does work good.
It's all about depth. I've no-tilled. I planted I no-tilled some of the Bermuda in my yard with that drill. Sure did.
Now, again, it's not the ideal thing for every situation. There's different, applications of different ways of farming and different ways of doing things depending on the situation that you're in or where you're at, the area that you're at. There's a different application, for everywhere. But these fields that we have that are washing so bad, I think the best thing's going to be to do with those would be at least try strip till with them. If nothing else, maybe no-till on it and see what a difference that makes.
No-till, and then also, vegetative waterways. You don't see as many as those anymore. But we used to have a lot of waterways that we would vegetate, and farmers would even hay them every now and then.
You know what I think was the biggest issue with that I've seen? Because we still have some of those old vegetative waterways that were built 30, 40 years ago. What was the first thing they planted? What was the vegetation that they planted on those waterways? Bermuda grass, coastal Bermuda grass. And so now, as weird as it is, the waterways have gotten so much higher than the field around it. Like the water will get to the edge of that Bermuda grass and then hook a left or, go downhill from there instead of getting through the Bermuda grass into the waterway.
Well, that's because all the topsoil's being washed away or blown away.
Well, it is, and plus, it's all building up inside the water. The waterways build up, and so I guess you need to go clear those out quite often or something, But like the now, if you don't maintain those things properly, they do more damage than they do good. Because we'll have washes on both sides of the waterway, whereas the water should be going into the waterway and draining out. But due to buildup of grass, I guess, because Johnson grass will grow there, different things will grow there, and it'll fall over and freeze and die, and it builds up higher and higher. If you don't maintain it right, well, it gets to be more of a hindrance than anything.
Yeah, it's building topsoil, yes.
Yeah, and the flat farming has knocked the terraces down. You got to rebuild those quite often, in order to do that. So, I'm considering possibly that maybe the strip till or even.
Yeah, well, I saw them in southwest Minnesota. They did a lot of that strip tilling stuff, and it was neat to look at. And they also did a lot of no-till farming too. Now they still, I think it's a controversial amongst farmers. Some of them are all about it, and some of them just want to keep traditional because I do.
Well,
believe
and it doesn't
that
fit every situation. Like me and you could farm in two different parts of the county, and you'd be like, Brad, you're an idiot. That it's just fine where I'm at. Like we don't lose any soil. Like I got fields, it's just fine.
Yeah. So
but it
depends on your terrain and your topography, and a whole bunch of different factors. And I guess one of the gripes I've heard about people say about the no-till is that yields aren't. I've heard that. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that yields aren't as much as like traditional, conventional farming. But the inputs, you don't have near as much inputs as far as
well,
time
now with the price
plow.
of diesel too,
Yeah,
so if you could save a trip over the field with a plow or something, you save quite a bit of money.
Sure. I mean, I think my father-in-law said he $250 of diesel in his tractor didn't even fill it up. $250.
No, it's unbelievable right now for sure.
It's crazy.
So if
$125 in my truck won't even fill it up.
And that's really a price that a cost that you don't never really put into your head.
But it's
how
hitting
big
you now.
Is.
Yeah.
Even like feeding cows every day.
Yes.
You don't.
I'm noticing
it doesn't even hit you in your head. You're like that it's costing me probably $50 to drive to feed cows every day, and in a couple different pastures.
Yeah.
You do that every other day. That adds up in a big hurry where, you don't really put that together in your head that's going on, but it is.
Well, you do at the end of the month when you're like, where's all my money going?
That's right. Yes, it sure does happen.
Yeah, it's a huge effect. But so the inputs, I've heard that no-till drilling, you don't have those inputs. And so when you look at it, you might not have as greater yields, but you're making more money.
You're gonna probably need a good sprayer because you're gonna have.
You got to have a good sprayer.
One way you're gonna control, the competition and stuff is that way.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have.
And you got to have a whole different planter, set up for no-till planting and stuff. Yeah. And so you do have to have all specialized equipment and that type of thing for doing that. But again, like with a strip till machine, the way I've been looking into it is you go through there, pull it through there, it creates a nice little furrow to plant a seed into.
Yeah, just where you're working.
Same planter that you've been using, for your conventional farming for years. So again, the more water we can slow down to make run through the soil, the better off we are in all aspects of everything, really.
Sure, because as the cities get bigger and we take out more and more pasture land and more farmland for housing or solar or whatever, and impervious cover increases, these issues are going to be, and you can't do nothing much in those impervious cover. There's not a whole lot to do, and rooftops don't help percolate.
They don't absorb much water either.
No, they don't. So, like always.
And back in the old days, everybody caught that in their systems.
Yes, they caught it. And, in the old days, a lot of people were a lot more self-sufficient and self-reliant on themselves, and they utilized the rainwater off of their roof. They had gardens, They made usually hand-dug cisterns to catch the water, so they had water. Whereas now, most of the population is living in cities.
That's true. Yeah. And becoming more and more.
Yes.
And so, well, I guess hopefully that covers streams.
Well, yeah, but brush. I said it's a facet. The science of streams and stream ecology, y'all, is mind blowing to me. It's one of the neatest things that I wish I knew more about. I even wish I'd have went into school to do that after I learned a little bit about it, just because it's fascinating how.
Well, there's nothing more relaxing either than sitting on the bank of a creek or a river bank or something like that.
Tree frogs.
That's right. Yeah. But nowadays you got to look down so far when you sit on a river bank and see the bottom of it.
They're being terribly entrenched. And a lot of the gravel bars that are natural functions of streams and supposed to be there, the pools, riffles, and runs, are being silted in or being mud, or sediment that
just because it can't get out of banks to drop the sediment elsewhere
in the floodplain where it needs to be. Yeah,
it's nature trying to fix itself. I guess.
Because a lot of those streams those streams will try to, like, if they become terribly entrenched, it'll try to fix itself. It tries to make its own floodplain because as they get wider, the load is still coming. So it tries to build like its own little floodplain inside the entrenchment, especially the smaller streams that are entrenched.
Like you said,
can't get out.
Years ago, whenever they let the dam open for such an extended amount of time, you could have had all the surface cover you wanted up there on the riverbank, but the way it was undercutting the riverbank and eroding the riverbank away from running at a constant level for so long that it wasn't designed to run at.
Yeah, it wasn't designed. It should have been out in the floodplain. And that's another thing. When it gets out in its floodplain, it slows down. Mm-hmm. It's the floodway, the middle of the river, where it's so bad. And when it can't get out, it's fast and hard, heavy all the time. Whereas if it was getting out at that 2 times the width, it would be getting out into its floodplain, and those floodwaters aren't moving nearly as fast as those channel waters are.
No, absolutely not, and dropping lots of good things in the meantime.
Yep.
For things to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess that's about it today, bud.
All right. Well, heck yeah, Brad. Well, I enjoyed it, y'all, and I know that was a broad, scattered topic, but it was fun to talk about. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's good to get back with you again, Chancey, and it's good talking to all y'all again, and maybe we'll catch this little chance of rain that we have for tomorrow.
I hope so. We sure need it. And y'all out there across the state and across the country, if y'all, hope y'all stay cool and get some rain too.
Yes, sir. And hey, it's good talking to all y'all. And I guess the next time we catch a break, we'll talk to y'all again.
Bye-bye, y'all.